Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Sip&Talk.
Everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you're in. Welcome back to Sip&Talk.
Welcome, Sip&Talkers.
Hey, today is Friday, March 13th, 2026. Traditionally, this is Black Friday, but the tension in the global situation right now is probably more real than any horror movie. We are in the second week of the Iran war, and data and intel are flying in like snowflakes.
Exactly. The situation right now is extremely fluid. Today, we are going to help you completely categorize this massive amount of information and organize it into a clear list. While you are listening, remember to maintain independent thinking and don't let single headlines dictate your perspective. Before we jump in, a quick disclaimer. Any investment targets mentioned on this show are not professional investment advice. They are purely for data reference.
And later on, we will also have a critical discussion and exploration of China's newly launched policy on cracking down on Taiwan independence.
All right, let's get into today's topic, the Strait of Hormuz butterfly effect.
Yeah, so we're basically on, what, day 13 now?
Yep. Day 13, yeah, going right into day 14 of Operation Epic Fury. And honestly, looking at the numbers coming out of the Pentagon, it's almost hard to process.
Oh, absolutely. It's staggering.
Right. Like, the U.S. and Israel have hit over 15,000 targets. Let's just, pause on that for a second.
That's a massive number.
15,000 individual kinetic strikes in under 2 weeks. I mean, it is just this overwhelming, breathtaking scale of operations.
It's completely unprecedented. And you saw when Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stepped up to the podium?
Yeah, the press conference.
Exactly. He explicitly called it an unfair fight.
Right.
And, he wasn't just exaggerating for the cameras.
No, he's just stating facts.
Right. Militarily speaking, he's just laying out a blunt logistical reality. The conventional Iranian military apparatus isn't just taking damage. It is rapidly and systematically collapsing.
System apart.
Yeah, we're tracking the complete destruction of their Soleimani-class warships.
Mm-hmm.
So for all practical purposes, their traditional naval combat capability, it just simply no longer exists.
Gone. And it isn't just the Navy either. Their suicide drone capabilities, which, let's remember, was supposed to be their big ace in the hole, right?
Right, the big threat.
Exactly. Those are reportedly down 95%. Missile launches are down 90%.
Wow.
But you know what I find particularly striking here? The physical dismantling of their military is mirroring this complete implosion at the leadership level.
Oh, that is such a critical observation. Because, hardware is completely useless without command and control, right?
Exactly. Who's giving the orders?
Nobody right now. The new Supreme Leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, is reportedly severely injured. Possibly disfigured from a targeted airstrike.
Jeez.
Yeah, and the cascading effect of that is just profound. The remaining senior leadership has gone completely dark. They're retreating into these deep underground bunkers.
Which makes sense, but...
Right, but when your generals are buried under tons of concrete just trying to survive the next hour, they aren't coordinating complex counteroffensives. The leadership vacuum is just total.
It really is. Yet, amidst all this overwhelming tactical success, the human cost on the Allied side it's a really stark reality check.
It always is.
We've seen 13 U.S. service members tragically lose their lives. And what really drives home the reality of this conflict, I think, is that 6 of those casualties were from a KC-135 refueling tanker crash in western Iraq.
Yeah, and that specific detail is so vital for people to understand. That KC-135, it wasn't brought down by an enemy surface-to-air missile. It was a non-combat incident.
Oh.
It's just this incredibly sobering reminder that there is no such thing as a frictionless, sterile military operation.
Never.
Even when one side exercises this absolute overwhelming conventional dominance, the fog of war, the mechanical strain, just the sheer exhaustion of the personnel, it guarantees that the human toll is always going to be terribly real.
Absolutely. And because the conventional fight is basically over at this point, the real threat is what's happening in the ashes. We're seeing the ultimate asymmetric spite play here.
Oh, for sure.
Imagine a totally defeated boxer. He's bloodied. He's down for the count. The referee is already waving off the fight.
It's over.
Right, it's over. But on his way down to the mat, he manages to pull a padlock out of his glove, reaches out, and just locks the arena doors from the inside.
Wow, yeah.
He knows he lost the title, but he's basically trapped everyone else in the burning building with him.
That is the perfect visualization of the Strait of Hormuz right now. Iran knows they cannot win a ship-to-ship naval war.
Right.
So they simply broke the environment.
Just flip the board.
Exactly. They've effectively mined the Strait. Because, you don't need a multi-billion-dollar functioning navy to drop sea mines in a narrow channel.
Not at all.
You just need a few surviving commercial vessels acting as fronts. And right now, that padlock is holding firm.
It really is.
The Strait is effectively closed to almost all international shipping, with the bizarre exception of vessels flying Chinese, Iranian, Indian, or Turkish flags.
Which immediately triggers this insane cascade of defensive reactions thousands of miles away. Because when European nations watch a defeated military successfully choke off a global waterway with just a handful of sea mines,
They panic.
they realize how incredibly fragile their own supply chains are. That's why we're seeing companies like the Swedish defense firm Asabi stepping up production so significantly.
Right.
The entire continent is restructuring its defense posture just to prepare for these sudden asymmetric shocks.
And because the military has padlocked those doors, the global economy's lifeblood is trapped inside.
Yeah.
We're transitioning from a military crisis directly into a brutal economic reality check for, honestly, every single person listening to this right now.
Let's talk about that wallet impact, because it's hitting hard. Brent crude has surged past $103 a barrel.
103, that's just wild.
It's a 42% increase in barely a month. Global diesel prices are up 25%. If you are driving to work today, you are feeling the shockwave of those sea mines every single time you pull up to the pump.
You really are.
Yeah.
And the economic anxiety out there is palpable. Philippe Aghion, the Nobel laureate, he's out there waving a severe red flag.
Yeah, I saw his report.
He's running the predictive models and warning that if this escalation pushes crude to $150 a barrel, we are staring down the barrel of a 1973-style global energy crisis.
Which is terrifying.
It completely changes the entire calculus of global growth.
But, the irony of global economics is that chaos always creates bizarre windfalls for someone, right?
Always.
Because of this profound price spike, Russia is quietly pocketing an extra $150 million a day in oil revenue.
Just massive amounts of cash.
Meanwhile, China is actively swooping into the market. They're buying up all the stranded, heavily discounted oil that Western countries can't or won't touch. They are basically feasting on the disruption.
Which forces Washington into a really tight corner. The panic toolkit being deployed right now is this crazy mix of desperation and historic measures. Like, the U.S. Treasury has issued a temporary authorization allowing the purchase of Russian oil that's currently at sea.
Wait, let me stop you right there. We spent years sanctioning Russian oil. Why on earth is the Treasury suddenly giving a green light to buy it?
I know it sounds crazy, but it's because the sheer physics of energy demand are overriding political sanctions right now.
Wow.
If the oil is already loaded on a tanker floating in the ocean somewhere, Washington has basically calculated that the immediate need to get global supply moving and lower those prices is way more critical than the optics of the sanction. It's a pure triage maneuver.
Okay, that is wild. And they're also talking about using the Jones Act. I think a lot of people hear Jones Act and their eyes kind of glaze over, but it's actually a huge deal for how things move inside the U.S., right?
Exactly. It's massive. Normally, a foreign-flagged ship cannot pick up fuel in Texas and drop it off in New York. We legally force companies to use American-made, American crude ships for domestic routes.
Just to protect the local maritime industry.
Right. But those American ships are really expensive and in super short supply. So by pausing the Jones Act, the White House suddenly unlocks this whole hidden fleet of international transport vessels to move domestic fuel around cheaply and quickly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and you add that to the U.S. and the International Energy Agency coordinating this record-shattering release. 400 million gallons from the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
Just opening the taps.
You're basically seeing a government throwing everything at the wall.
400 million gallons is a staggering Band-Aid. But here's the angle that completely blew my mind when we were looking at the research for this.
What's that?
We always think of oil as this old school industrial era problem, right? Factories and cars. But this energy shock is tearing right into the absolute bleeding edge of the tech sector.
All the AI stuff.
Yes. The Magnificent Seven tech giants, their generative AI profit margins are getting completely eaten alive by the Strait of Hormuz.
It's the ultimate hidden cost of technology.
Yeah.
Because why are AI margins shrinking? It's because generative AI models don't just think they consume.
They are power hungry.
Exactly. The data centers required to train and run these systems require an incomprehensible amount of electricity. So when global energy prices spike because a waterway in the Middle East is mined, the operational expenses for running those server farms just go through the roof.
I just love the irony of that. We conceptualize AI as this magical, invisible entity floating up in the cloud.
Right.
But it turns out the cloud is heavily tethered to physical barrels of crude oil stuck on a boat.
Yeah.
If the physical oil doesn't flow, the invisible cloud gets incredibly expensive to keep afloat.
The physical world always reasserts itself, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And this energy shock is creating an absolute nightmare scenario for the Federal Reserve.
Oh man, Powell has to be sweating right now.
Oh, definitely.
Hmm.
Trump is heavily pressuring the Fed on social media, demanding they cut interest rates immediately to offset the oil shock and stimulate the economy.
But Powell's hands are tied, aren't they?
Completely tied.
Yeah.
High oil prices bleed into the cost of manufacturing, shipping, groceries, which means high inflation.
Right.
If the Fed cuts interest rates while inflation is spiking, they're basically pouring gasoline on an open fire.
Yeah.
The markets have run the math and completely repriced their expectations. Traders are now betting we won't see a single rate cut until 2027.
And amidst all this profound economic pressure, that there was that bizarre sideshow with the subpoena against Fed Chair Jerome Powell over the headquarters renovations.
Oh, right. Fortunately for the Fed, the court just formally dismissed that subpoena.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, they called the investigation unfounded. So it clears away a sweeping political distraction for Powell. But, I mean, the core economic math remains brutal. He is backed into a corner by crude oil.
Absolutely. And because the U.S. and Europe are suddenly forced to reinvent global logistics just to keep the lights on, Beijing is realizing that physical geography is still the ultimate leverage.
They're taking notes.
They really are. And they're taking those lessons straight to the Pacific. Let's look at how the world is trying to adapt to this Middle East closure, because the logistical pivot is insane. Middle East airlines normally carry about 18% of global air freight.
A huge chunk.
Right now, those fleets are largely grounded.
And you couple that with the ongoing Houthi disruptions in the Red Sea, which are blocking roughly 25% of global container trade. The arteries of global commerce are suffering a simultaneous blockage.
See, I'm looking at these Red Sea disruption numbers, and it just doesn't compute for me. If 25% of container trade is blocked and the cargo planes are grounded on the tarmac, how are store shelves in Berlin or Chicago not completely empty right now?
It's a fair question.
Like, the math doesn't add up.
Well, they aren't empty, because logistics companies like Flexport are executing these incredibly complex, highly inefficient workarounds.
Like what?
They are literally shipping goods by sea from Asia to Los Angeles, offloading them onto trains or trucks to move them entirely across the United States landmass, and then using domestic air freight to jump them over the Atlantic to Europe.
You've got to be kidding me.
Nope. It's a sweeping, massive detour. It keeps the supply chains breathing, sure, but it bakes immense friction and cost into every single product.
It's a global stress test, and strategic observers are pointing out that this exact logistical nightmare is basically a rehearsal for a potential crisis in the Indo-Pacific.
That is the pivotal connection here. While the West is entirely consumed by the Middle East, we are staring down a highly consequential diplomatic moment on March 31st.
The meeting.
Exactly. The scheduled meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping. Beijing is watching the Western vulnerability to oil and mapping it right onto their own strengths.
Right.
China holds commanding leverage over critical minerals. You know, the rare earth elements required for everything from iPhones to fighter jets, they could easily weaponize those supply chains the exact same way oil is being weaponized today.
And sitting right in the middle of this high-stakes meeting is Taiwan. There's a $14 billion U.S. arms sale for Taiwan sitting on Trump's desk, just waiting for a signature.
It's an unprecedented package, too, loaded with advanced air defense systems.
Yeah.
But the timing is the ultimate variable.
Oh, for sure.
Does it get signed before the summit to project strength, or does it just sit there as leverage?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is this $14 billion arms deal a premium insurance policy to guarantee regional stability, or is it just a massive poker chip sitting on Trump's negotiating table to squeeze out a more favorable trade deal with Beijing?
And that ambiguity is exactly what has U.S. allies in the region bracing for impact and basically taking matters into their own hands.
Yeah, look at Japan.
Exactly. Japan's Sanai Takaichi recently came out and explicitly reiterated the doctrine that a Taiwan emergency is a Japan emergency.
Which is a bold statement.
Very. That statement alone has pushed Sino-Japanese relations to an icy low.
And Japan isn't just releasing strongly worded statements either. They're cutting metal. They're rapidly developing long-range anti-ship missiles and pouring funding into next-generation submarines. I mean, they see the writing on the wall.
Australia is feeling the exact same pressure. They are leaning heavily into AUKUS Pillar 2.
AUKUS, right.
Yeah, now, most people hear AUKUS and think of the deal to sell nuclear submarines to Australia. That's Pillar 1.
Okay, so what's Pillar 2?
Pillar 2 is the joint development of advanced capabilities, artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, and autonomous underwater vehicles. The underlying anxiety in Canberra and Tokyo is stark. If the U.S. military is bogged down policing the Middle East, do these allied nations have the autonomous capacity to fill a sudden power vacuum in the Western Pacific?
Wow. Because the hardware is lining up, let's look at the software, the psychological and semantic war going on right now that's arguably just as critical.
Oh, the messaging is huge right now.
Right. China-specific maneuvers ahead of this Trump-Xi meeting are fascinating. Since February 27th, flights by the People's Liberation Army Air Force into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, the ADIZ, have virtually stopped.
Yeah, it's an eerie total silence.
After months of relentless daily pressure, it just suddenly goes quiet. But analysts aren't viewing this as a retreat.
No, not at all. It's strategic camouflage. They're creating this calm, frictionless, diplomatic atmosphere ahead of the summit. But behind the scenes, the engineering hasn't stopped.
Not even a little bit.
Intelligence has spotted China testing advanced stealth drones, specifically the GJ-21, on their new amphibious assault ship, the Sichuan.
And this ties directly into the blueprints of their newly drafted 15th five-year plan. The focus has aggressively shifted toward a concept they call military intelligentization, which, what does that actually mean on the ground?
So, intelligentization is Beijing's formal doctrine for fully integrating artificial intelligence into autonomous weapon systems and command networks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a direct systemic counter to Western technological containment strategies. For example, the U.S. CHIPS Act was designed to restrict China's access to high-end semiconductors, right?
Right, to slow them down.
Exactly. In response, China is pouring vast state resources into domestic AI military applications. They're preparing for a future where engagements are decided by algorithms and drone swarms way faster than a human operator can even blink.
So the hardware is getting this quiet AI-driven upgrade, but the language Beijing uses just got a very loud, very aggressive update.
Yes, it did.
In their latest official policy reports, Beijing changed its wording regarding Taiwan independence. For years, the official stance was opposing Taiwan independence. Now it has officially shifted to cracking down on Taiwan independence.
And we really need to apply some critical deconstruction here, because words are the architecture of policy. The shift from opposing to cracking down on it changes the entire posture.
It really does. It sounds way more aggressive.
It moves from a passive, defensive disagreement to an active, offensive, and potentially legalistic enforcement mandate. It frames the issue not as a geopolitical dispute between entities, but as a criminal or rebellious act that requires policing.
Let's do a thought experiment here just to, strip away the emotional baggage and look at the raw mechanics of this framing. When we talk about independence, what does that actually mean in the historical context?
Right.
Because objectively, the Republic of China, which governs Taiwan, and the People's Republic of China, which governs the mainland, have been separately governed since 1949.
Historically speaking, yes, the Republic of China existed before the PRC was founded. They have operated as parallel, entirely non-intersecting systems of governance, taxation, and military command for over 7 decades.
So let's flip the framing. It's like looking at two completely separate computer operating systems that have been running on different hardware for 75 years.
I love that analogy.
Right. Imagine if Taiwan suddenly announced a policy to crack down on China independence, arguing that the PRC broke away from the original ROC government in 1949.
I mean, it sounds absurd to the modern ear, but logically and historically, it follows the exact same mechanical framework. What your operating system analogy highlights perfectly is that the word independence is simply a linguistic framing tool.
Exactly.
It's utilized by the larger power to establish an implicit hierarchy. basically suggesting that the other side is a subordinate breakaway faction rather than an equal parallel entity.
Calling one of those operating systems a virus that needs to be cracked down on isn't an objective technological assessment. It's just a marketing narrative designed to justify a hostile corporate takeover.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. When you strip away all the historical grievances and the carefully constructed linguistic traps, the reality of the geopolitical friction isn't about unification versus independence.
No.
It's fundamentally about annexation versus autonomy. It is a raw, pure competition for international legitimacy, for power, and ultimately for survival.
Which, honestly, brings us back to the core philosophy of our show. We want you, the listener, to practice that exact kind of independent thinking. When you understand the mechanics behind the words, the headlines stop being scary and they start becoming predictable.
Absolutely. Our time today exploring this geopolitical and semantic breakdown isn't about criticizing any specific country or pointing fingers at any group or people.
Not at all.
It is strictly about providing you with objective facts. It's about stripping away the highly emotional, manipulative language that gets thrown around in the daily news cycle so we can look clearly at the raw, underlying machinery of global power.
But before we go, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over on your own. We just spent all this time talking about China's 15th five-year plan and Australia's AUKUS Pillar 2 and this sweeping global race toward military intelligentization and AI warfare.
Right, the envisioned future of combat, swarms of stealth drones, autonomous ships, algorithmic decision-making executed in milliseconds.
Sounds like sci-fi. But as we watch these incredible futuristic systems come online, is it possible that the absolute greatest vulnerability of all these advanced future weapons is still a muddy, messy 19th century resource called crude oil choking in a narrow strait in the Middle East?
Wow.
Like, if the AI can't get electricity because the oil can't clear the choke point, does the algorithm even matter?
That is a fascinating, sobering question for the strategist to figure out.
Something to think about while you're filling up your gas tank this week. If you enjoyed this conversation, please make sure to subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast wherever you get your audio.
And we also want to give a huge shout out to our good friend Mickey. You have to check out his YouTube channel, Mickey to Life.
Yes, Mickey to Life. His recent short clips feature some absolutely amazing travel vlog highlights. But I have to warn you, he leaves them on a total cliffhanger, and it is incredibly agonizing to wait for his full video. Go subscribe to him and tell him to hurry up and edit.
We will see you all next time. Stay curious, stay objective.
See you next episode.